Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. Today's episode is a special one as we dive into the fascinating world of early childhood development and the groundbreaking research behind the first 1,000 days 1KD program. Joining us today is Liat, a researcher at Princeton University, deeply involved in the 1KD research project. But before we delve into the details, I do want to share a personal note. My family has been actively participating in this research project for the past almost exactly 2 years. It's been an eye-opening journey, and I am so excited to learn and explore the insights and discoveries with you all because we don't really know what's happening. In a good way. The first 1,000 day program is not just another research endeavor. It is an initiative bringing together experts from diverse fields to predict language development of infants. These critical early years can shape a child's entire future, influencing cognitive abilities, emotional well-being, or even social outcomes. So let's uncork the science behind the first 1,000 days of life and uncover how the groundbreaking research is paving the way for healthier, brighter futures. So without further ado, let's welcome Liat to the show. Welcome.
Hi. I'm very excited to be here.
I am so excited to be here. And as I mentioned, this is just such a near and dear project, I know to you, but to us too. And I can't wait for everyone to hear about it and kind of from my perspective too about living through it, which is pretty cool. However, before we start that, to start each episode, we have our wine, and win of the week segment. This is where we share our favorite bottle of wine, vent about something that has been bothering us, and celebrate our recent victories. So grab a glass, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So Liat, what is your WINE of the week?
I came prepared.
I love it.
And so it's a Rioja. And we've been recently drinking Riojas quite often. So yeah, that's my wine.
That. I might have to have Mark bring me down some wine. It was a chaotic evening with him getting home from work and putting the kids to bed. I didn't even have a time to uncork the bottle. So what is your WHINE of the week?
My husband has been in hospital last week and this week and is going to be next week, but he has some issues with his eyes. And so I'm whining about that.
I am sure that's very stressful. And I hope that all of his surgeries go well. And this will be the last one for next week for you. Fingers crossed. Yes.
Yeah,
so what is your win of the week?
Well, that it went well. That, we're navigating it and I'm grateful.
That is amazing. So I always like to ask my guests, what is one significant challenge you've successfully navigated shaping your journey to where you are today? And what is one accomplishment you are most proud of in your life?
So I moved here almost 8 years ago. And so I guess the biggest challenge to navigate when you immigrate from one country to another is to build everything from scratch. All your friends are gone. Mm-hmm. Your entire community is gone. Everything everything, how it is done and how you navigate it is gone. And so to build that, it was very, very challenging. It was also very exciting, obviously, and energizing because it's also exciting to learn something new in a new place, and new people and so forth. But it was challenging. And so I view this, I guess, as my, having accomplished it, having built a new community here.
That's amazing. And I can't imagine how hard that is because I moved about 40 minutes from my parents and I feel like I'm in, the middle of nowhere. And it was hard. It really did take me probably about 8 years to really find friends in this area and feel like I belonged here. And we've been in our house 11 years. So, I know it's not nearly the same, but I can totally empathize with the way that you...
Yes, but you're right. It takes a long time. Yeah. It took me quite a while, but I eventually,
yes.
I felt
that's
it
amazing.
Yes.
Good.
And, yeah.
That's great. So let's talk a little fitness. What is your favorite way to stay active?
So theoretically, I really like the gym very much. I theoretically also really like Pilates, and I like running I like cardio things very much, but I'm not doing it
That's
regularly.
okay. We ebb and flow through our fitness, so there is nothing wrong with you have plenty of other things going on that you are doing more than a lot of people could ever imagine, probably. So one day you'll get back to the fitness.
Yeah, no, it's a monthly struggle. I'm getting
Yes.
back really and regularly falling out of it.
Yes. So when you are in your fitness routine, how do you think maintaining it contributes to your motivation and your understanding of the relationship between mental health and physical health?
Well, actually, I think it is particularly in the times in which I'm not taking care of my body
Hmm.
that I feel horrible.
Hmm.
And, and whenever I kind of feel that, I usually also know that in times in which I am the least, balanced, the least
Right.
able to deal
Hmm.
with this, is also the time in which I do the least take care of my
Yeah.
body, because usually there's something about it that sort of earths you, reminds
Yes.
you of, the physicality. It's not only, this feeling of, my heart, my lungs, my brain, blah,
Right.
blah, blah, but it's rather also, we tend to forget that, in those moments in which we remember that we have a body, I think we also, standing on both feet on the ground is something that you feel best when you are physical, and
Hmm.
it translates to how you deal with
Yes.
all the rest.
So I just like when you were saying like, your feet standing, on the ground, it brought me to I just started this book called Rooted, and it talks a lot about walking in the grass barefoot and how just connecting in that way can be such a big deal. You don't have to be going out running a marathon. You can literally just go outside with bare feet and get yourself rooted or grounded, and how connected we are to the earth just in those small ways, which can bring us some clarity and yeah, which I thought was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. I think it's, all these people who do, the tree hugging and stuff,
Yeah.
I totally get it, and I should do it too because it's a good thing. I totally relate to how meaningful it is, to feel, to just feel
Yeah.
it really physically.
And it's also really funny that you say that, because Parker, every time he gets out of the car, we have a big tree in our front yard. He goes up, he has to touch it and hug it every single time. And he just loves this tree so much. And it doesn't matter. Like today it's raining. He runs right to the tree and he's like touching it and like hugging it. And I'm like, all right, buddy, you're just connecting with nature, I guess. This is what you need.
It's beautiful. I think it's
Yeah.
very, very beautiful that he does that. It's
Yes.
wise.
So let's talk a little bit about parenthood. Tell us a little about your family.
So I am a mom to two teenage boys. One is, he just turned 16, and my younger son is going to turn 13 June 1st.
Right before Parker.
Yeah.
Parker's June 2nd.
So yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful time to be born.
Hmm.
And yeah, and both of them are, so they're obviously they're amazing. So Emil, my older son, he just, he had this really bumpy start into adolescence and was very unpleasant to be,
Hmm.
parenting. And he wasn't very happy with us being his parents, I guess. It was very weird. But he's
Yeah,
back,
good.
and he's older now. And he, for instance, with him, it was really interesting because he has been very, very, very physical.
Hmm.
All the time. And then, when high school started, first year of high school, he just, boom, it disappeared. He was dancing and it disappeared, and he stopped doing anything with his
Wow.
body. And he was so weird, And I tried to get him, I took him with me to the gym, and I tried to and I got him even, sort of a former someone who has been formerly his dance teacher. I asked her to do a couple of private sessions with him, to sort of get him into working out and stuff. Nothing. It was horrible. And then suddenly he sort of like woke up from this moment of started going to the gym. Now, for instance, he went to the gym before he went to have a test at school. He's like,
That's
and
great.
everything else changed. He started talking to us again, and he just came back.
Yeah,
and
he was just finding himself.
Yeah.
Which is it's such a weird time, especially, I mean, for girls and for boys, but boys, they go from these like little boys just running around to all of these, both girls and boys, hormones that going wild and you don't know how to control them. And you're feeling, for boys more, I feel like it's the anger with the testosterone. And I mean, teaching 7th through 12th grade, I see it. It's the 7th and 8th grade boys.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh my God, you guys are insane. Like they cannot control their emotions and it goes from yelling to crying, and it's just interesting to watch. And then by the time they're like juniors, they're like really chill. Yeah. I was just saying when I was pregnant with Parker, I had this group of 8th graders and they were the worst group, and they're still in school. And I tell them this still all the time. I would literally cry after class as I had them 9th period, and it was so bad and they were just insane. And then I had them pretty much all for driver's ed this year. And I was feeling really anxious to have them. And they came in and they were all like on task and did what I needed. And I said, you guys really grew up in 2 years. I'm really proud of how you guys turned out, because I was nervous to have you again. And just being able to literally sit and listen was not in their realm when they were in 8th grade. And then they could, be a part of meaningful conversations and within 2 years.
That's exactly how it was with Emil. And now Noe is starting. So my younger one now is starting, and it's like,
oh boy.
And he has a different personality, so it's going to be a different ride with him.
Well, at least there's an ed to it at some point, right? Hopefully. Again, fingers crossed. So what do you think you were least prepared for in parenthood?
I think I was least prepared for all the moments in which I don't enjoy being a mother. So I didn't compute that one.
And it's so, I don't think a lot of people like openly talk enough about that. And that is such an important part of parenthood, where going through even one day, there's going to be moments where you're like, I hate doing this. I don't want to do this. And it literally kind of just happened tonight, because Mark didn't get home until 7:30. So it's like the kids are going crazy. They're not eating dinner. I made this whole dinner and just trying to get them to eat. And I'm like, I just hate doing this right now. And then 5 minutes later, they're eating and we're laughing and we're playing I Spy. And and then I was like, oh, I love doing this, but I think a lot of people highlight it all as positive, and you don't realize that those moments of your low moments are very normal. And they'll pass too, even though in the moment, again, you're like,
no, they do. But I didn't think about that. It was not something I could imagine. I imagined all kinds of things, like, my baby crying and, being able to hold the baby in spite and be patient and blah, 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 and then and then there is this moment where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I on a beautiful Saturday night at home, full with spit and, all my friends out and having a good time, watching a movie, talking to their girlfriends, going on vacation, all these things, right? There are many, many moments at which you don't, you can't do it.
Right.
Because you're a mother.
Yes.
And when
you have to be selfless. No, trust me. And you maybe can watch those moments of me.
No, you'll be surprised.
I know.
Surprised. It is very, very difficult. I have to say, I'm happy to say that, because I'm saying this all the time. So we see relatively little, and maybe it's a good idea also to explain what exactly we're doing. But I have had the privilege, and I think most of us did. We were surprised how many magical moments fell, into our laps with, we pick random minutes out of, we have right now 970,000 minutes.
Oh
And
my
we
gosh.
randomly pick minutes to just see if it works, So fact that out of those randomly picked, I'm talking here 0.1% of everything, that is recorded
Yeah.
is in some way viewed. There's nothing we look at.
Yeah.
And yet there are so many moments in which we catch them, they
That's
play.
cool.
You guys talk to them, you call them beautiful names, and it's so apparent that you love them. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff.
That's cool.
Really beautiful.
Yeah, it is funny because it's like the big joke in our house whenever we have like an epic, moment. We're like, sorry, Princeton. And, but so I was going to ask you two more questions about parenthood, and then we'll get into it. What do you think your parenting style is?
Okay, so I have thought about that. I think in general, I'm more what you would call, I try to be more, how do you say, directive, and what you would call, I don't know how you say it in English, right? So I'm stumbling, but it's authoritative, I guess.
Yeah, authoritative.
Authoritative, exactly. But I have to say that I'm not. I wish I had more structure. I wish I was less permissive. I wish I was more consequential and I had more time to follow up on the rules that I set. But I am a believer theoretically in, in rules, not in a sort of dictatorial kind of way, but definitely in, I believe in structure, and I believe. But my husband is very good at it. He's better at it than I am.
It's hard. It really is. And I always say, like, if I wasn't a teacher, and like, I think back to my first couple of years of teaching, and my classroom management was a hot mess. But I feel like it translates very well into parenthood, because I've seen firsthand the mess that it is when you're like, yeah, I just want everything to be like fun, and I don't want to follow up on the rules, and I just want everyone to, and I always say, like, I've had so much training in kids who are on extreme levels of the spectrum, or wherever they fall emotionally. My kids are not that way, thankfully, but it's very easy. Like, my sister's always like, how do you just like do this and give them a consequence and stick with it? Like, I feel bad. And I'm like, I don't feel bad because I know what the other side of it is. And not that there's anything wrong with either way. But it's just like an interest. I always am like, if I didn't have any of this training, I would not ever be able to follow up with the consequences, because I would feel too bad.
I'm pretty sure you're a better mom.
No.
Better educator. Like, with regard to the, no. I think it has a lot also to do with, there is an element of experience.
Yeah.
I think, the fact that you get pregnant, then you get a kid, and good luck to you,
Yeah. I was just talking about that. I said, there's no rule book, and everyone's telling you all this different stuff that works. And my advice to everyone is, whatever works for your family. What you're doing will not work for my family. What I'm doing will not work for your family. And I think that is the beauty that I found in parenthood, that I don't have to do what anybody else is doing, and they can be just as successful as I am, and we're not doing the same thing.
Yeah,
which is great.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But I think there is also an issue with experience. It's not, there is truth to, having the fourth child is probably, the fourth children are more normal than the first ones, because the first ones you're still.
Yeah. That's what, yes. My parents are always like, we didn't know what we were really doing with you, so we just kind of guessed. You turned out all right. I'm like, well, thanks. So speaking of that, the last question in parenthood, what is one piece of advice you would give to other parents?
So yeah, I don't know. I would like to give advice to adults, not to parents, because you're right, whatever works and stuff. But the other part of me, the sort of the non-academic part of me, I'm a big fan of play work and of adventure playgrounds, of, more freedom for children. And I think that we oftentimes as adults, we forget that our needs and their needs are not the same. And I
Yes.
think that we do more for them than they for us. But I think actually, in truth, children have to work around our needs all the time. And I think we adults don't ask ourselves enough if they, how much joy should a child have? And what is joyous for a child? Is it sitting, like a good kid at the desk, doing their homework, going to bed when you need it, shutting up when you need to talk to your girlfriend, or is it throwing the flour in the kitchen, trying out what it's like, to dip your hands into it, to make it really sticky and horrible. Yeah. So I think in general, adults tend to overlook children's needs for joy, real joy. And I think we probably this generation and the last one would have profited from us, seeing them a little bit more than we did.
Yeah, I totally. And as a phys ed teacher, I could not agree with you anymore. Play is so important for them, and just getting them dirty and muddy, and it's like the happiest for them. And that's where they learn and explore. And it goes back to the basic, you don't have to get the fanciest toy. You could go out back and they can play in the dirt and they'll be learning just as much, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's get into the first 1,000 days. So, just to give a little background of our perspective to the listeners, we found someone posted in like a local mom's Facebook group that Princeton Baby Lab was doing this. Okay, well, it was you. Thank you for that. It was like a flyer, and I was like, "Oh, this looks cool. I'm having a baby soon." I think it was for maybe 3 months. Was it what it was supposed to be for?
Yes, we were looking for pilots.
Yes, for the pilots. And so I emailed, and, I got a response back, and the response was that we are looking for people to sign on for 3 years. You gave all the details of it. And, I remember I was sitting in the giant parking lot reading it on my phone, the email back, and I was like, all right, how am I going to convince my husband to do this? And I called him and I said, listen, you just have to trust me on this. We're going to meet with Princeton, and we might have cameras in our house for 3 years, but they're going to learn how language develops. And he's like, no. I said, write down all your questions and we are going to meet and get some answers. And then you can decide after that if you don't want to do it. You don't have to do it. And, we met with you, and you answered every single one of his questions. Plus, we love the forward thinking. I always say, like, the fact that you're going to reach out to Parker when he turns 18 to see if he still wants to be a part of the program. You set us up with a therapist if needed. You had already thought of so many more things than we did. So to be a part of that, feel so comfortable with everything was really important for us. So we signed on. And we also loved the fact that you said we could kind of quit if we needed to at any point, which we've never felt that way at all. And so that's kind of how we signed on. But how about from your perspective, what brought upon this project, and can you explain it exactly what it is to everyone?
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many ways to talk about this. So I think we've all experienced, obviously, we all see children being born very helpless, and then they grow and they learn to walk and talk and think and communicate with us in multiple, word sentences. And there has been, as long as people have been thinking about humans and writing about it, we have been wondering, how the hell does it work? And there are a lot of theories out there many good ones, many plausible ones, but we've never been able to actually capture development in its richness, in its messiness, in its complexity, because usually also the way we think about things, we're not able to think about multiple factors all the time working together, all the, the physical environment and the social environment and everything sort of impinging and the child embodied in their environment. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that could matter for these things. And we can't look at everything at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So philosophy and later psychology have always been doing or needed to do is to break it down, to look at only one piece at the time, and usually a short time. Because in addition to all the things that float around and influence us at any given moment, it's also there is also the time, the seconds that add up to minutes, that add up to hours, that add up to, all these. So there are a lot of theories about how this all works, the time dimension and the space dimension and how all these things work together, but it just was impossible to study it. And so when video cameras were invented, video cameras that were not those huge ones, but the portable ones, psychologists started to film people. But again, when you film people in order to analyze it into, they started, to analyze it by frame, for instance, movement or something. They also couldn't do endless of it. You can't have a person sit in front of video and annotate, every frame of the minute. That would take years, right? So only recently, with the advent of AI, you could actually do this crazy thing of record every second, every minute, as much as you can, put it together and count everything that's in there in order to get a really complicated picture of influence on child development. And so the project is a project where we recruited 15 families and we asked them to allow us to put cameras in their living areas, which is, usually living room, dining room, kitchen, and sometimes bedroom of the child, but not, all the private rooms not. And we turn out those cameras when the family wakes up, which is sometimes at 6 and sometimes at 7. And then we turn them on and they turn off when the child more or less goes to bed 12 hours later, 7 days a week, all the time. And then we record this and we take it up into, a storage on very secure storage. And there we chop it up into 1-minute pieces and we store those pieces in order to analyze what's in there. How many words? Is there touch? Is there, intonation, whatever. So it's a huge of, as I said right now, 970,000 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
All of these things together over time.
So what is this? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so what is the significance of the 1,000 days? How does that come into play?
So the 1,000 days are generally in developmental science, they are very, very special. It's, it's not 1,000 days. It's, it's sort of it's a general idea of the first 3 years of life, right? During the first 3 years of life, we develop until we die, and even beyond that in a way. But definitely as living creatures, we developed until we die. But there is no time in our lives that we develop as quickly as we do. There are changes that we go through, as you said, there are changes in adolescence, there are changes, in early adulthood, there are changes for us in menopause, becoming a mother, there are a lot of changes and hormone, big changes, but we change so much from, we are unrecognizable oftentimes, from 3 to 1, it's not the same. And so it's a very special time. That's very interesting if you are interested in knowing how changes and development occurs, how learning occurs. And it's also the only time in our lives where we start out with very little.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to really know how does someone learn the first word, you cannot start by looking at someone learns their 50th, 60th, or
Mm-hmm.
70th word. You have to look at first word.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very interesting. So 1,000 days is the time. You want to know the first step? You got to look for the first step, not
Yeah.
for one step.
And it's so because I guess I didn't recognize it as much with Willow, but like, because you're a brand new mom and you just think like your whole focus is on everything that they do is just so cool and new and whatever. But I just remember with Parker, I say so vividly that he just needed to like allow him to survive for the first, couple weeks. Just feed him, keep him alive, feed him, change him, get him to sleep, hug him, love him, that kind of stuff. And then obviously we're pretty hyper focused on his language just being a part of this program. But I think in general, like I was saying earlier, most parents
Yeah.
are. But to see, and be so aware of how it develops, it's so crazy how you go from nothing to now he's spinning in circles trying to sing the ABCs. It's pretty cool to witness. But so what are some of the key indicators that you guys are focusing on in predicting language development, I guess?
I'll tell you. So we don't look at that. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
Of course there are the predictors and we'll get them and so forth, but that's not what we're after. So what we're after, and this kind of relates to the last question, so think about this. So baby is born, and if you look at the sound signal, of how we speak when we, you record us, when you look at it, you see that actually between many of the words that I'm speaking, there is actually hardly a pause. There is pause, but it's very small, right? So now baby is born and it doesn't understand the language, right? Didn't learn it yet. So what it hears is like when we hear a foreign language on our completely, at last, where does it start? Where does it end? What's going on, right? So now let's imagine it's probably very similar, and even more so because they don't even have the concept of language. They haven't even understood that this is what the world is about. People speak languages. So they are clueless. They have no indication what's going on. They don't know where a word starts and a word ends. How do they learn the word mommy? How do they do that? It's crazy, right?
Have you guys figured it out yet?
We have theories about it, yes.
Yeah.
And there are some good theories out there. So I think, what we're after really, and this is why we're collecting this kind of data, is we are trying to collect the environment that is really surrounding the children, not something that is, simplified in an experiment, like all the words they hear, or as many as possible, which is also just an approximation because we don't get Parker's words when he's outside. We don't see him hug a tree, all these things we don't see and can't. So it's also just, it's just a fraction of what Parker gets. But in the first couple of years, there are a lot of home, and the home environment is very important. So it's very useful. So what we do is we collect this environment and we try to build basically mathematical models that simulate the emergence of a word. And we do this so the mathematical models are algorithms, they are AI. So what we do is we work with let's say, algorithms with which we try to replicate the learning process. And it's very, very difficult to do. Because even though we have very strong, very smart sort of algorithms and machines, even though we have a lot of environmental input, the brain is so much better at what it does. And so it's difficult. there are a lot of questions. For instance, how much input do you need? Do you need, how much architecture? What,
Right.
like, how much predefined does it have to be? You later ask about, networks and stuff. How is it built? Do we
Yeah.
arrive with something built in that allows us to discover a structure within this very, very weird world? Or do we not need that? Do we have what is the learning rule? How does it work? So this is what we do. When we follow you guys is, sort of when we follow the children's verbal development with questionnaires, we're less, there is, of course, individual differences between all children, and everyone is doing great. But our question is rather, okay, so they're all developing language and they're all doing fine. So all the input that we have is the input that went into those little creatures, and they're producing now. Mom, dad, there's all kinds of, animals that they like to name and stuff like that. How did that, how does the video data that we have and the audio data that we have, how does that explain? What do we need? How do we need to arrange it? How many words? Is it how many words? Is it the sounds? Is it the intonation? What are the running rules? So this is what we actually do.
Yeah. And I just, outside of the technicalities of it all, it's so interesting to me to wonder, well, there's part of me that has this anxiety that you guys are going to find some, which I hope you do, some major, you will, factor for language development. And I'm going to be like, what was it? My family wasn't doing this. I could have been, pushing Parker's language or Willow's too at an earlier age or whatever that may be. So I guess my question would be, once you guys find out this information, how do you think it's going to shape the future of, because right now, being in the midst of toddlerhood parenting, there's so many different studies of, you have to read X amount of books per night, and you have to do, this is what's screen time, and none of this screen time, and watch this show, but not that show because it's too quick, for them to watch and understand. How does all of that kind of fit into what you think may come from this?
Okay, there are so many questions.
Sorry, yes.
No, I'm just saying, it's not one.
Yeah.
It's a couple of questions. And so, well, I'll answer the first one. The last question I'll answer very similar to how you answer parents. Humans have been learning language before there was books. They were telling stories, and they did quite well at it.
Yeah.
There are differences in cultures. Not every culture reads, and everyone's doing just fine. So that's the first thing.
That's good.
Someone said to me, do you know that, in Britain, people don't, they don't read to their children, or they don't talk to their children until the age of so-and-so. And I said, well, as far as I can tell, they just, they're doing great.
Right. Yeah. If
they're good.
And that is, I talk a lot about with my friends who feel like, it's with so many things of infancy, breastfeeding, or how early your child walked, or how early your child talked. And again, me being at the high school level, I really don't know what those kids did when they were 6 months or a year old. And maybe some of them were not advanced at that age, but now are. And it's so interesting, kind of that connection as well, to see not only with their language development, but how they'll be in 15 years from now.
Yeah. So obviously there is a relationship, and we know that. We've seen that there is a relationship between how early you develop language and but this is group measures, right? So on group averages, which is sometimes hundreds of kids, right? So you have a difference between, on average, the group who learned early to speak, there were also on average more kids who did really well in school and had very high success in school and intelligence score and fantastic self-regulation abilities, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a group. It's not on an individual level, but it's a good, it's if your kid, is ahead of the curve, that is a good thing for sure.
Mm.
Or that is something that you can, you can be like, oh, thank God.
Feel a little relief in. Yeah.
Last year there was the winner of, I grew up in Germany. Last year's winner of, some really, really big literary talent prize was a young poet who learned to read and write at the age of, he started reading book at the age of 15.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
My favorite poet, his name is Ocean Vuong. He is an immigrant to the United States, and I don't remember entirely when exactly he started to read and write, but I remember that was not early, and he is an extraordinary poet. So
it doesn't always align, which is great.
Within those groups there is so much individual difference, and this is what makes it so difficult. To really, on average, yes, you can have some general idea about, input is important, so read to their child a lot and so forth. But if you don't.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges that you've come across in measuring and modeling, the development in the first 1,000 days, and how do you address these problems?
So a big issue is that we have a lot of data.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, easy question, right? Nice question would be to ask, so how many words did Parker hear? Just let's get an estimate,
Yeah. I don't know.
And that's really difficult.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a lot of talking going on in the houses when the children are asleep or the children are in the other room or whatever. So we first have to figure out where the child is, which is really difficult because they're small. And there is no, out there is not on the shelf machine that can tell us where the baby is, because even person recognition, you'd think, well, person recognition is going really well, right? But we're not looking for the person, we're looking for a baby, and there's no one out there on the market who has developed a baby detector. Yeah. So we have been building a baby detector more or less since day one, and it still doesn't entirely work. I mean, it works for the small ones now.
Right.
We're really close, but it's complicated. Right. Many families have, pets. So in the beginning, we used a motion detector. We were like, okay, let's find out where they are first, So at any given moment, we have all those different rooms, right? Let's find out where they are. Okay, so you do a motion detector. Half of our families have a ton of animals. So we have dogs and cats and everything, and they move around. So we often get, false alarms. And so to detect, to filter out, and to zoom in and find the data that you want to count, this in itself is sort of a methodological question, not to mention that the engineering behind getting to that data is enormous, but it would be boring to tell you about it.
So will you be able to, using this data, if that comes out in the future, be able to go back to all of these recordings and reanalyze it? Okay. Yeah.
That's a plan. So the plan is, and this is what you need to do with something so big, you need to build an infrastructure that allows to address multiple questions. And the beauty of it is that the way it is built, it's like a big bucket of data. And so every time we look for motion, it notes it. There's motion. Every time we run over it, something like we have sound, speech detection, it notes it and it puts it together in a table. Now, I told you about this thing that what we are interested in is the richness of the input.
Right.
So it puts it in the table. You have one point that detects all the motion, and another one detects the speech, and the third one will detect, all the movements in the room. And the fifth, and so there is a table, and every time someone is going to ask a question, they're actually going to enrich this data set.
Mm.
So many and so many objects were in the room before a child learned the word cup, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And there are interesting questions because now, for instance, we've been looking at, so you would think if we only would have to count, right? So I want to
Right.
count how many times did, Parker hear the words blah, 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 mommy, because that's the
Mm-hmm.
first word, let's say. And how many times did Parker hear by now the word cup, right?
Right.
And then I would assume mommy is more often, and hence, Parker said the first word, mommy. But that's actually not the case, right? Because Parker also heard the word I, he, she, cat, cup, desk, fridge, water, all these things. And yet, out of all those words, he chose mommy. And he
Mm-hmm.
actually heard the other words more often than mommy because you don't refer to yourself all the time as mommy. You just
Yeah.
don't. So he
Yeah.
heard much more the word he. Why doesn't he
Right.
say the word he?
Yeah. That's
So
so
you look, yeah, right?
That's something I never thought of before
Yeah.
because you just think that's something that you've been working on probably, the mommy and daddy is what you like work on the most, but the reality is
No,
they
no, he
haven't.
heard pronouns much more often than he
Hmm.
heard your name,
Wow.
and yet your name for
Yeah.
him is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So it turns out that it's not only just counting or the plain words that we read to them at night, right?
Hmm.
There's much more to that. There is intention. There is
Yeah.
there is a reason to say a word. You want to
Wow.
communicate. And that's why
Yeah.
you don't say he, she, they. You say mommy, daddy, you know, um,
That's
all the
really,
things
I
that
mean,
matter.
yeah, I not again, it's so exciting when they say those things, but I guess you don't really, like I said, relate it to being that these are actually the most important words that they're saying first than the ones that they hear the most, which is pretty
Yeah, they
cool.
want to talk to you.
Yeah. So, have you found any similarities or major differences between the families involved when it comes to language development? Is there, I mean, I don't know if you could go kind of into that, but is there like one family that just does not read? There's one family that reads 100 books a night. Or,
No, no,
is it,
not just trusty, but yes, of course,
yeah.
there's families who have TV and families who don't, and families who have animals and family who
Mhm.
don't. Yes, every
Yeah.
family, everyone is
Hmm.
unique, but beautiful, really. And
Yeah.
I'm not just saying this like that, really. I think, I think you feel that too, but
Right.
we like, I think on average, all in all, I think that the families, even though you guys are so different, like you're different on so many levels, you have no idea. Like so many levels. We have, across the entire racial spectrum. We have, we have different languages. We have, same sex parents. We have everything, more or less.
Hmm.
As much as you can have everything in 15 families, but it's really diverse. And it's not only on these very, very broad levels, it's really the size of the houses, the kind of animals they have, the kind of, everyday rituals, the people who are coming in. There's everything is unique and it's beautiful in its
Hmm.
richness. More or less, there is a difference in the pace that children develop language, but there is a
Right.
difference in when they did their first steps or when they for the first time rolled over and how they did that. There are differences. Every child did it, at their own pace, own style,
Hmm.
but it's
It's pretty
not that
neat.
you could say, I would say, looking at this family, I'd predict, the child will,
Yeah.
speak, yes, speak, not walk, yes, walk. No,
Right.
no, no. All of
Well,
it's surprising actually how
this is,
ultimately it's all a loving families. Sorry.
yeah. No, I was going to say, I was just thinking of this as you're saying all this. Do you guys have any plans to reconnect with the families when the kids get older in the sense of seeing if there is any connection with the first 1,000 days to, I know that's kind of
I would love
far.
that. I would.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things that I would love. And we're right now, it has been just so, ultimately recording the families 7 days a week means
Yeah.
also that I'm working 7 days a week. I
Right.
mean, right now it's better, but in the beginning it was really, really, really hard. And it still
Yeah.
is a very, very intense project
Mhm.
because we have to, you have to maintain this. And like technologically, it's, as you know, we regularly call you guys to
Right. Yeah.
restart
I
this
know,
stuff.
like some days I don't like, I sometimes go a while without checking my main email and I'm like, crap, the one's been out for a while, or like I forgot to send in a survey. Oh my gosh, I'm ruining everything.
No. Yeah, but so we're like in the background, we're making this work. But yes,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about, it would be interesting, but there was also a question of
Right.
what would
What
we
would you,
want to follow up?
right.
What is useful and sensible,
Yeah.
because part of what you are obliged as a researcher is you are not supposed to waste people's time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get it.
But you have to have a good
But my
reason.
husband and I literally are always like, like they could do so much with all of that videos that, maybe they could use it to just see like different parenting style, for example. Like, I'm sure we all have different parenting styles, analyzing that. And we're like, how could they use this for that? And just like conversations between the two of us that we think would be so cool for you guys, just because you have all of this information that you will now already have done. So like, what you could analyze it in the future for, but that, we also
It will
say
be
like,
more, I think actually, I mean, you're right, theoretically, yes. But I think that our data, because it is so big, it is particular for more fine-grained things. And I think,
right.
for instance, parenting style,
Maybe not,
I could
because
ask you.
yeah,
You tell
that's
me,
true too.
right? And we would talk about your attitudes, which is
Right.
something, by the way, that I want to do. I actually, so one thing that I'm right now, I've been interested in it for a long time, but I haven't gotten around. I'm really interested in crying and crying behavior, baby crying behavior, and how that relates really to self-regulation development.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one of the things that is really useful to know is how you experienced the crying.
Yeah.
Right? How did you experience it? How did you feel? Was it difficult? Not so? Was it in the beginning? Stuff like that. And so I've just submitted to the IRB a request to hand out those questionnaires to you guys and to ask
Oh,
you
cool.
about
Yeah.
it. And then, it would be sort of interesting to, for instance, look at, find the crying, which is complicated. Find the crying and then, do stuff like, how long on average does it take until, caretakers attend to crying? And how does that relate to, there are a lot of theories, which I don't entirely believe in, but there's a lot of theories about, the role of parents, self-regulation development. I'm very interested in that. And so it's more the fine-grained stuff. It's really like how often, how much, how fast over time, how does it change,
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I'm just thinking about myself right now, and I'll hopefully be answering them for you, but with their daily, like if they're crying pretty like much, well, depending on the situation, like if they like trip and fall and they're crying, I'm probably like, it's okay as long as I know they are. But like I am very much, Parker will come up and give me his hand so I can kiss it, and we're very much during the day. But for like, we didn't do complete cry it out, but we did do a lot of that. And like with sleep, we're definitely,
I did too.
I would never during the day let them cry as long, even it's not like I'm letting them cry for hours upon end. It's like 5 minutes here or there, but I would never do that during the day. But for bedtime, that was part of our practice a little bit for them when we were sleep
that'll be a
training.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
So,
I
yeah.
I don't think it works with every child, but if it works,
Yeah. Yeah, for
yeah.
us, it was really helpful.
Yeah.
And, we had really good success with it. And it was, like I said, it wasn't very straining for us, I guess. But I know talking to so many different, there's so many different, judgments of it. I'm like, again, listen, if you want to stay up all night with your kid and go in when they're crying, go ahead. But my kids are in bed and they are not waking me up most until 7 or 8 a.m. the next day, which is what
Yeah.
works for us.
Yeah, no, but it's also, I think there is also a difference between children. Like, I definitely
Yeah, for
believe that
sure.
my kids, both of them, have, they just have a temperament that
Yeah.
allows this to be, a pretty quick thing. We did that for three to, I don't know, maybe 5 nights or
Yeah.
something. In the beginning, maybe my firstborn tried a little more, but never more than 10 minutes. And I didn't, and I could support it, I
Right.
guess, And
Yeah.
so
But
I totally get when, I know a lot of people who said to me, but they wouldn't stop crying and it was so horrible. And then I'd say, yeah, well,
yeah,
okay,
then
forget
that's not
it.
for you,
That sounds
right?
horrible,
Yeah. It's
but
not good.
I was lucky. They,
Yeah.
eventually just decided to fall asleep and it was very helpful.
Yes. Another question that I wanted to ask. So I remember seeing this years ago, and still today, there's like it randomly will come up that babies, before they can speak, have like a communication sound that maybe is the same amongst all babies that we don't really know about. Have you guys found any of that to be?
Yeah.
That's so cool. That was one of the biggest things. And I'm like, I hope that they could at least prove that this is something that is real, that, we've has been such a cool thing, because I don't know.
I'll tell you sort of one thing. So yeah, we've been looking for, so in order to build the AI that is then producing, sort of annotating all the data for baby sound, you have to, give it, you have to tell it, this is a baby sound, this is a baby sound, this is a baby sound, find it now. And so what we do is we randomly take and then listen in and listen for the baby sound, annotate the baby sound, and then create sort of a training database for the AI. Just usually something like 100 examples, sometimes more, depending on how difficult it is. Anyways, one time, so Kira is doing a lot of that. And Kira's like, oh my God, I heard the baby make the sounds that the parents make while they're talking. And I think the parents didn't even realize that in the background there was a baby who was just copying the soundtrack, and it was so beautiful. And I was like, mark it. I bet they will want to have it,
Yeah.
So we also try to sort of mark moments that we think would appreciate to have, because they're just so magic.
Yeah.
And so we mark them, and the plan is that eventually, we'll sort of collect for every family. It's not a lot, right? It's like sitting there, but it's cool. I'd love to have it,
I remember you talking about that being a possibility of, something. And I do think about that randomly when I'm like, this is all on video, which is something really cool to just maybe have like, some sort of snippet that.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we're trying to, we're trying to do that and to be like, okay, I think they would love that, and keep this one for them and stuff. And to sort of, we hope that, once it runs out next year, we'll be able to, catch those for every family and put something together.
So is there any additional information or insights that you would maybe like to provide that we have not covered? Because we have covered so much, which I could keep talking for hours about this, because as not only is it near and dear, but it is so just interesting.
Yeah. So with regard to, there are two things that I wanted to talk about. The first one is that I think that with regard to what we are going to contribute to the world, I hope. For me, and that is a very nerdy, geeky kind of contribution that you can have only when you're sort of a scientist and research, is I'm very excited about the idea to be part of a research project that looks at child development in its richness and attempts to do something that is less simplistic. I think that simplicism, it makes it easy to communicate issues, but it also tends to really create very weird perceptions of what parenting is, what motherhood is. It's all sort of like, if you do this, that will happen. If you do this, that will happen. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then, and then you get stressed out if, you did that and yet
Mm-hmm.
it did not happen. Right. And vice versa. And so I think, what I'm excited about is to be part of a project that attempts to do something less like that can talk much more about, the messy dynamic that is development. For research, that is going to be a big step because we're not good at that still. For the world, I think building models that explain learning rules better and explain them from the environment will help us to better simulate and what's going wrong. And so it's not about, the group differences. A child who learned, their first word at the age of 18 months versus 15 months versus 20 months or something like this in a way, but rather, communicative problems, that go with language developmental sort of real delay, autism spectrum disorders, all kinds of disorders of social communication that, imagine you build something really complex and you say like, oh, this goes into it and that goes into it and that goes into it. And then when you have a well-built model, what you can do is you can say, okay, now I'm going to see what happens when I mess with the input, or what happens if I mess with the architecture, or what happens, and so, and there are multiple learning rules. What if I use only one and not the other, wow, I get something that's very similar to what I see in children with this kind of, that's what's, that's what's wrong. So it's much more in that direction of, severe and these small differences of whether,
Yeah. And like, I just personally feel so excited to be a part of this as well, that you guys are, we're able to help you guys find the answers to these. And that's something that I always tell people about, which is, this, again, being in the thick of parenthood in the toddler years, everybody has an opinion on something and what you're doing, right? And I'm like, this research is going to be able to give a lot more of a definitive answer than just going to talk to, a panel of 10 doctors and having them say, this is what we think is happening. You guys are going to be able to say, no, we saw this is a trend in the way, hopefully you will.
Yeah.
And I just think that is the coolest thing about being a part of this and watching you guys be able to bring this all to life, which is so amazing that you guys are doing this. And I, like I said, I always feel whenever I start off telling people about it, yeah, we have cameras all over the house. What? You have cameras in your house? No, I'd never do that. I said, well, and then once I explain it, and actually it's funny, my husband is on the sniper team for Bucks County, and there was another guy that is a sniper who is a part of the project. They don't really know each other because it's a big, and so they were at a Christmas party. My husband didn't really know this guy. The guy lives, I don't know if he moved or like he just was, I don't know if he wasn't going to be a part of it anymore, but all of a sudden the guy started going, oh my gosh, can you believe, like, I don't even know, just say Joe. Okay, Joe, his family is a part of this project and they have cameras in their house. And Mark's like, wait, what? Wait. And he's like, oh my God, no. And then he starts telling everyone about it. And they're like, wait, that's so cool. I can't believe that. Yeah. So I just thought that it was just, he's like, I can't believe it. This other guy is a part of the project and I'm never going to see him again, I don't think. You know, it was just a weird connection for them to kind of see that. So,
I think for many people, this thing, there's so much about the project, really difficult also to explain how we protect it and how we make sure that it's really, I think we have some very, very special measures to make, to protect this data and to protect you guys' privacy. And, but I think in general, people oftentimes don't, when you start talking to them about, so how does it happen? And people go like, yeah, I never thought about it actually. How does it happen really? And once you think about that and you think about the magic that is in it, then you go like, well, you guys capture all of that?
Right.
Go, yeah, that's what we're capturing. And you go, wow, cool. Yeah, I contribute to that too.
Yeah.
Because it's really not about observing you guys or something.
Yeah.
It's really about capturing the magic.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, really, from the beginning to the end of the conversation, it is so funny. Everyone's first reaction, I'd never do that. By the end, they're like, "Yeah, maybe I would definitely do that." And literally, like, they're like, "Well, what if you're like naked walking around?" I said, "Well, our laundry room is in our downstairs area, and literally, it was like day 3. I put my stuff on the couch. I like was changing my shirt and all of a sudden I look up and I'm naked and there's the camera right at me. I said, well, I'm glad we got this out of the way because I don't know, like, whatever. I don't think you're looking for that. You're not. You're looking for the kid.
Yeah. Okay. No, you have to know when it exists.
Yeah.
And many forget. And sometimes they also stop forgetting,
Right.
But just so you know, obviously there's so much we don't see, but if we catch such a moment, we take it out.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because our assumption is, I mean, obviously we can't catch all those moments, right?
Right.
If we caught it, we take it out because we say, well, that doesn't have to be in a database on child development.
It doesn't?
No.
Yeah.
And we try to, we see so little, but even the pieces that we see, the idea is we train the people who are looking, which is a very small group, but the people who are looking, we train them. And the idea is, okay, your job is not only to annotate this data, you are looking at this. And if you see anything that these people would rather not have in there, and we'll take it out. Because we owe that to them. It's not, we don't need, we have so many minutes.
That's hopefully, unless, of course, maybe that make or break moment is in the midst of a, family who is not clothed, but you'll never know.
No, we don't. We will never know.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. So that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of The Running Wine Mom. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend, obviously, a heartfelt thank you to you, Liat, for joining us and sharing your invaluable insights into the first 1,000 days 1KD research program. It's clear that the work, yes, it is so clear that the work being done and developed is going to shape the future for the generations to come. So thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate that.
Samantha, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you because, yes, you're part of, those 15 families who are producing something very, very special for generations to come. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Awesome to talk to you.
Yes, you too. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this important conversation. Whether you're a parent, caregiver, or simply someone interested in the fascinating world of language development, I hope you found today's episode both informative and inspiring. Remember, the first 1,000 days of a child's life are truly precious, and every interaction, every experience matters. Let's continue to support research initiatives like the 1KD program and prioritize the well-being of our young members of society. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it. You can follow me on Instagram at @therunningwinemom_. And Liat, where can the listeners find you?
On the Princeton, on the website of our lab, which is the Hasson Lab, HASSON. www.princeton.edu. And there is a very short description of the 1KD project. We will in the future build a website, but only if it is useful for, we won't promote it. There's nothing to promote about it. It's just a research archive that we want to keep safe. So we will build a website if it's necessary, but if not, we'll keep it small and quiet.
Yeah. And I will link that website for everyone to check it all out for a little bit of more info. So thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, and keep embracing the joy of motherhood. Cheers, and I will be back next Tuesday.